Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. I'm doing this on Wednesday night again because I really want to get that video finished up for this weekend. I'm pretty excited about it and I hope it's a help. I don't know, but I had a blast making it and learned a ton, so hopefully you all enjoy it. But anyway, let's jump in and see what questions we got this week. First up, over on Ko-fi, Scary wants to know, what would I say is the limit for stacking devices on top of a PVM 20L2? They have a Yamaha Advantage AVR, a Pioneer Laserdisc player, and a Project turntable that all fit on top. The wooden cabinet they built has the appropriate load-bearing support underneath it to handle the weight and minimize bowing. So I would be very careful about this. For me personally, it was weight and weight distribution. So I had that 1U rack mount magnetically shielded speakers that I sold a while back, and that was kind of heavy, but it was almost exactly the width of a PVM and BVM. So I just put little rubber bumpers on it, just the same little rubber spacers you would get for stereo equipment, and I put them on I think I put 6 of them on there so that all of the weight was on the sides and none was on the middle. Because anybody that's taken apart a PVM, that shell is basically just a U shape. So then there's nothing in the middle holding it up. And I was totally fine about that, but I'm still putting the pressure on that one piece of metal. Remember, that metal doesn't really go to some kind of strong frame. It is the frame because all of the CRT is bolted to the front. So if I were you, and I guess I should preface this by saying I always err on the side of caution, because if you have to spend a little bit of money getting another storage thing to keep all of this stuff versus how much it would cost if it smashed into the tube of your PVM, not to mention if it hits the anode cap while it's on, you're going to be sending a gazillion voltage everywhere. Like, I would always err on the side of caution. And I actually think the vinyl turntable would be a perfectly fine thing because I don't think those are very heavy. I've never tried the Project brand, but the ones that I use, the Fluence, they're heavy, but they're not heavy enough to really smush anything down on there. So that might be it. Also because PVMs don't move, so that might be a cool place for it. It might look good, but honestly, if you had a choice, the answer would be nothing. Like if you had other places to store it and this was just an aesthetics question, I would say just do nothing. Just be safe. Who cares? Be overly safe. But yeah, I would pick the lightest one, and I would also try and see if you could put the pressure on the corners right where it folds and not anywhere in the middle. And I don't know if that's possible for the turntable, because the Fluence one I have, I think it has things in the middle and on the side, not on the edges. So yeah, I would just be very careful. Also, they're looking to use direct mode from an N64 digital and PS1 digital system to their PVM, mostly to simplify cabling and route digital audio through the AVR. Are there any special considerations other than use one of the Porta HDMI to YPV PR adapters? Well, there's no telling if those work anymore. That's a huge problem we're all having in retro, is the companies who make these things. Actually, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I believe the issue is the companies that make the chips. They make them in runs of like 50, 100,000, and every time they do a run, they do a slight update to it, even if it's the same model and everything. And they've removed support for 15 kilohertz in a lot of these. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's a cost saving thing. Because remember, if you're making things in the quantities of 100,000, a penny starts to matter. So I don't understand why they do it, but you're going to have to find one that works. And there are a few people in the retro scene that are trying to work on building them. It's all pretty slow going. There was a couple of people that had them near finished. So I should try to follow up again. But basically, yes, all you should be able to use is an HDMI to component video or RGB converter, but you got to find one that'll work with 15 kilohertz, and those are rough. So, or if you do find one, it might drop resolution or drop signal every time you change resolutions, which, depending on the game you play, if you're playing like Dino Crisis or something, that's a big deal. So I don't know. Hopefully that'll get solved at some point in the future. But yeah, that's so. Basically, to answer your questions, try not to put anything on the PVM if you don't have to, and try to find yourself a compatible HDMI to YPV PR converter. And if you find one off of Amazon that's in stock, not just like a fly-by-night eBay thing, please let me know, because I'd love to buy one and test. And if it works, I'll do a short little video on it and let everybody know. So thank you for the kind words, and hopefully I got the right answers to your questions. Next up on Floatplane, Shorjor said the Pixel Party event was yet again a success with some 100 guests or so. Awesome, congrats. All of their equipment has been stored safely in the loft. That's great, so you don't have to lug it back and forth. They stumbled across some analog equipment to add text and graphics to an analog video signal over composite, and it got them thinking that maybe for the next event they could add interceptors that put text overlays into the video feeds at each console setup. That way they could have announcements like raffles and competitions directly on each screen. They've looked into Arduino-based equipment in the TV out library, and this seems feasible, but only via composite. So their question is, do I know of any such equipment that supports RGB? Because they're slowly transitioning the setups to all RGB. It's got to exist, but you would have to go into a deep dive of what used to be very, very expensive broadcast equipment and see if it would work for there. You could try to do something like run composite, like run it over the sync line and the red channel or something like that. So maybe that would work, because maybe it would sync over the signals that are the RGB signals, and maybe the text would be all red, all blue, all green or something. But you could try getting creative with that. And if you had an oscilloscope, even like the really cheap one that I talked about a while back, you might want to put it on the line just to make sure you're not adding extra voltage for that. Because for composite video, I imagine you would run the signal in and then run the signal out. So it would just mux it over it, and there shouldn't be a voltage issue. But if you're trying to mix it in with RGB, that might not actually work. But I was just trying to spitball here to save you some money. One silly option that they've seen that could work is the Max 7456 OSD chip. It's monochrome and composite only, but since monochrome composite is just the Y signal, they should be able to transcode RGB to YPBPR, run Y through the OSD chip, and then transcode it back to RGB. But then the YPBPR signal would be out of sync, and the monochrome overlay would likely become a translucent mess, since the PBPR values on each pixel are non-zero. Yeah, so you basically were saying what I was saying about RGB, but for component video and a little more technical, but we were both saying the same thing. Play around with it if you want to just have some fun with it, but I would really kind of look into other stuff and see if you could find it cheap. Now, the only thing that might be kind of a bonus is nobody needs this equipment anymore. So something that might have been 5-10 grand, 25 years ago, might be $100 now, if that. It might just be e-waste and you get it for free, who knows? So I guess if anybody listening used to work in broadcast and knows of very specific equipment that could do that kind of overlays, maybe drop a model number in the comments. And if not, who knows? Maybe we'll figure it all out. Now moving over to Patreon, Dan Lavoie said for HDMI switching in their setup, they just stuck with Extron. They used two SW6 HD 4Ks that they picked up on eBay, then later they upgraded to the DXP HD 4K Matrix series, also bought secondhand. So now their setup has an 8x4 matrix feeding all 4 outputs into a second 8x4 HDMI matrix. In all, this gets them 12 HDMI slots for up to 4 simultaneous outputs with 1 layer of daisy chain. If they had another matrix and put more thought into the signal routing, they could probably get up to 20 selectable inputs with no added layers in the signal network. This only maxes out at 60 Hz. They haven't found an affordable 4K 120 Hz option yet, but for their setup, 60 Hz is workable. So that's a very cool setup. If you wanted to get really nerdy, you could probably hook up some of the Extron control equipment that people, or control protocols. Maybe you use a Raspberry Pi with one of them, others you plug into your network, and you might be able to just program something so it acts as if it was one switch. But I mean, if it's working for you, don't. I just wanted to throw a little layer of nerdiness on top of that. But that sounds absolutely awesome. And I really would love to find time to look into that stuff. I think an Extron 8x4 HDMI matrix, even one that maxes out at 60 Hertz or 4K 60, would be fine for my testing, because for me personally, I want to route everything that's not, or anything that's 4K 60 or under through the switch with one output going to the TV, one out going to the RetroTink 4K, and the other out going to my receiver, and then one extra one if I want it for streaming or anything. So 4 outputs would be perfect. 8 inputs would actually be 7, because one of them would be a loop back for the RetroTink. I think that would totally do it. So I should look into that for testing. But I do also really want to find equipment that people could just buy on Amazon, because the problem is your setup's probably perfect for me, But if I do a video on it and the last 7 that are available on eBay are going to be all gone, and then when everybody puts them back up, they're going to be jacked up in price. So it's kind of hard to do that. So sharing them through these discussions is awesome. Keep it coming, and I really appreciate it. But if anybody's wondering why I haven't done a video on these yet, that's why. I just don't want people to end up having to go through scalpers and stuff like that. So thank you very much for sharing. I would love to look into it someday, but I definitely want to continue to find cheap Amazon stuff that hopefully would work out for all of us. Speaking of HDMI switches, Severed Legs also wanted to recommend one they've been using for a long time, but I have to pause for a moment and just say that while I absolutely really appreciate recommendations and suggestions and feedback about equipment you've been using, the fact that you've been using it for a really long time means that I would have to approach this as if it were a brand new product. Because the way cheap electronics work is every run of manufacturing is probably slightly different. And sometimes that's just changing the brands of an exact equal resistor, capacitor, whatever, and they're actually identical in every way, but other times they're wildly different in the same case, the same exact link on Amazon, everything else. So when I recommend something, through a write-up on RetroRGB or a video, it's something that I've thoroughly tested the latest version of. So the brand that Severed Legs recommended was Roofull, Roofull. So if anybody was looking for cheap equipment, at least it's not just a shot in the dark. You could try finding that brand and see if they still sell them. And if they stink, then, no shade against Severed Legs. They were probably awesome a while back and changed. But it's kind of hard because without recommendations like this one, you just have no idea what to get and you're just buying random stuff. So Severed, thank you for the recommendation. I obviously just passed it on to people, but I just wanted to let everybody know, if you're wondering why I don't jump on some of the stuff for a review, it's that. Also, I am truly looking for the perfect HDMI switch for us, and I'm hoping to someday stumble across that. So keep the recommendations coming. Probably, it's probably going to come from one of you, the recommendation of something that I could test that might end up being perfect. So please keep them coming. Blarg McPants was hoping for some advice on surge protectors with at least 14 to 16 outlets in a long form factor. They're designing a new console cabinet and they're trying to plan their wire routing. Everything they've been finding is either a power strip only or claims to be a surge protector and has a brand name that looks like someone mashed their face in the keyboard. They would prefer to use a single unit, but if they have to use 2, they'd rather use 2 safe options rather than one sketchy one. So, generally speaking, and there's exceptions to this, but generally speaking, any of those power strips that are labeled surge protector are total bullshit. There is 0 surge protection in them, regardless if it's a fly-by-night brand or if it's a solid, reputable brand. And if you want proof, just take them apart. They're mostly just a bunch of ports wired together, badly wired together, like Voltar would not approve type of wired together. And there's just no protection on it. So what I would recommend, try to find whichever ones are form factor best for your setup. Maybe it's one really long one, maybe it's a couple of them that are tied together, because in a setup where you're having a ton of consoles, I'm going to assume that this is a home setup and only one console is going to be on at a time. Or maybe 2 if you need to leave one on and start up another one for something. But basically, you're not having all of your equipment powered on at the same time. From that point of view, you could have a million consoles plugged into one surge protector into the wall, because if they're only all being powered on 1 or 2 at a time, it's not going to put enough load on it to cause any issues, and you certainly don't have to worry about fire and all of that stuff. So what I would do is find the power strips, and maybe that's a clue. Maybe something that's labeled power strip is being honest, and if you have something that looks identical that's called a surge protector when it obviously isn't, maybe stay away from that one. But either way, try getting that set up, and then if you really want power conditioning on the end, then think about how much money you want to spend. You can get a sine wave UPS system to make sure you're completely isolated from the rest of your house, which, depending on where you live, like I probably should have something like that here with all the weird power issues I've had since I moved in. I just couldn't afford something like that. And a buddy of mine actually has exactly that. It's something that plugs into the main circuit panel of their house that always keeps it basically disconnected from the street with a small battery backup. Not like a power your house if the power goes out, but it brownouts, all of your equipment would completely stay up. So you could go that far. You could try to find one of those APC power conditioners. But I would just start with getting everything wired in and then decide how much actual protection that you need and kind of go from there. So hopefully I was able to point you in the right direction. And if I totally misunderstood, please let me know and I'll try to get it right next week. Andrew C. said, for Doug T's question about HDMI switches last week, they found that the TestSmart 16x1 HDMI for under 200 works great with all of the HDMI modded retro stuff, including their high-def NES and Ultra HDMI, and modern equipment that they've thrown at it as long as you're not trying to use direct video output modes. Apparently, the older 4K 30 TestSmart supports them, but theirs is the newer 4K 60 version, so they can't say for certain. Unfortunately, that means if you're trying to take advantage of the Tink 4K direct video modes, you're out of luck without additional hardware. A bonus with the TestSmart and the RetroTink 4K is that the donut hole kit by Donuts with Dad lets you take advantage of the Tink 4K's auto profile switching. Another awesome recommendation, you just proved my point from earlier though, the current one works for modded consoles doing HD resolution, but it's the older one that works with direct video. So based on just this weekly Q&A alone, it looks like we really need to determine this. So once everything kind of, give me to like the end of October and remind me if I forget, but maybe I'll go back into deep diving HDMI equipment and maybe I'll buy like 10 of them and try to find one that works and I guess just try to sell them afterwards, because I don't return stuff to Amazon unless it legitimately doesn't work right or if there's something, something very off about it. So if I buy them all and they're all great, but they just don't support PS3 or don't support direct video, but do everything else, then maybe I'll just buy them and sell them. But thank you very much for the recommendation. I'll drop a link to what I think is the one you're talking about, because a bunch of my friends have recommended that one too. So I'll leave a link, but I'll just also leave a little note that not direct video compatible. HH noticed that the favicon has disappeared for RetroRGB, which makes it hard to find in their sea of tabs. And also they think there used to be a home button up at the top that vanished. Is it just them or have others noticed this too? Nope, it happened like a month or two ago, and it's been driving me insane ever since, by the way. But there's a whole bunch of back-end stuff happening with the website. So the decision was made that, hey, it's safest that we get the back-end stuff done. Then we fix all the little things, which might just be fixed automatically when we fix the back-end stuff, and then go from there. So I would say definitely by the end of the year, hopefully before that, hopefully long before that, but little by little, we're getting through it. And sorry for the annoyance, but yeah, that one's driving me crazy too. And hopefully we'll get on it right away. But thank you very much for the heads up, because you never know. Sometimes I get so deep in whatever rabbit hole I'm diving down for research that I might have just missed it. So I appreciate the heads up. DW623 just wanted to follow up from last week since I asked what kind of PVM they're getting, and they're picking up a Sony PVM 20N6U that they're getting from Retrotech. So awesome, congrats. 20-inch PVMs are awesome. If it's coming from Steve, it's going to be in great shape. And I do believe that one's 15 kilohertz only though, so that's the downscaling that you're going to have to be doing for it. So once you get it, play around with it, and if you have any questions, let me know, but congrats. That's an awesome display, and I think you're going to really like it. Tech Noir started their question with, I'm lazy. I turn on all my retro consoles, SCART switch, Extron, power conditioners, you name it, with simply saying, Alexa, turn on the video games. Did I just turn on all your video games? And boom, everything is turned on how they like it. They recently bought those Kanto Aura speakers that I recommended. They sound great, especially for their retro video game systems, like a huge improvement over their TV speakers and way better than any soundbar that they've heard. Yes, absolutely. If you start putting them next to fancier desktop speakers with external amps and all that stuff, no, of course they're not going to hold up. But yeah, I mean, you're going to have to spend 3-4 times the price on a sound bar to get it to sound like that, and no TV speakers are going to match it. So glad you're happy with it. But their actual question is, how can they get this thing to turn on with the rest of their equipment? It requires a push of a button, and when turned off via Alexa, it stays off when everything else turns back on. It's really too bad, and the only downside to these speakers, the only downside to having those speakers. They wonder if there's another pair of powered speakers out there that sound just as good and don't interfere with their picture because they're using a CRT, so they need them magnetically shielded, or some setting that they're missing. Maybe it's not possible with the Kanto Aura, but if myself or anyone else reading this can suggest something, any brand or type of speakers that sound good, please let them know. So, I have a couple of things for you. First, the Kantos had a different model that they just released. I would definitely double check and see if there's any videos on there. If it's any other kind of power on situation, maybe that would work. But I also found a couple of other speakers that were 1 or 2 years old that are still available on Amazon that are magnetically shielded. Now, does that mean that they're still magnetically shielded? So if you'd like, if you want to, I could pick these things up, do all the testing, make sure they're shielded, see if this is something that could be programmed in. Hopefully it's just a physical power switch. So then you can get those just power adapters for your smart home system that you could program it to that. I'd be willing to test it for you and then just ship it to you when I'm done. If you're in the US, the shipping wouldn't really be anything. So you'd basically be getting your speakers tested for the cost of shipping. If you want to test them yourself, awesome. Please just let us know. But I was really interested because while I'm still finishing up all of this work, I do want to get more affordable speakers out there for everybody because I loved the Kantos, but they're expensive and that's not what is in everybody's budget. So having something around $100 that could perform fine, but also be brand new and fully magnetically shielded is something I think a lot of people might be interested in. So let me know if you're interested in doing that. We could, just DM me or something and we could figure it out. You or anybody else in the US that wants to do this with me, I would be more than happy to do the test, do the video, and then get them right over to you when I'm done, or just bring them back to an Amazon drop off if they don't work right for you. But let me know what you think. If not, I'm going to try to swing back, I guess, after HDMI switch testing and see if I can get us some cheaper magnetically shielded speakers for this exact reason. Adam Stalker said they just got going with a sick 2.0 audio setup based on the recommendation of the NAD amp and Ascend Acoustic speakers, and they're wondering if I could point them in the direction of my favorite MSU1 soundtrack creators. Do I have any to recommend or any games that have the best conversions? Well, first, I gotta say, congrats. I am positive that you are going to be very happy with it. And in fact, the only people that wouldn't be happy with this solution like that are people that already have like a $5,000-$6,000 stereo. But if you're just a normal person with a normal stereo, that is amazing. And I strongly encourage you to, as time goes on, as you feel like it, add a good older cassette player, like a quality older Sony or a Nakamichi if you could find them. You could find those cheap, not the crazy high-end ones, but you could find good ones cheap still. And definitely find like a Fluence record player. I love those. The one I have has been absolutely amazing. And if you have the 2-channel NAD amp, the 316B, its built-in phono preamp is actually great. Like far better than some of the other cheap meaning like 200 or cheaper ones that I've tried. So yeah, congrats. That's an absolutely awesome setup. And I think you're going to be happy with it. But to answer your actual question, my favorite MSU1 soundtrack are the stuff that Sam Miller created. I'll leave the link to the interview we did if you're interested. But basically, he took original SNES samples and made those back into the actual soundtrack. So it's the exact same soundtrack, 99.9% of it. There was some stuff he couldn't find that he had to get close. But basically, it's like an original CD quality version of the original. And a lot of the MSU1 stuff I've listened to, I loved it for a little bit. Like the orchestral versions, that was very cool. I played the Link Between Worlds on Link to the Past. That was nice, but a lot of times I'll get an hour into it and I'll go, it's just not the same. Whereas after playing the Sam Miller soundtracks, at least for Super Metroid, definitely, I didn't play the Super Mario World one, and I'm saving the Zelda one because I want to make a special occasion and then, set some real time aside, and maybe I'll stream it, maybe I won't. But point is, I would start with at least that Super Metroid one because I'll never go back to the original. It is the original, just better. The other ones, obviously, the NES to SNES conversions that have been using the Firebrand X Perfect Audio Rip soundtracks. All of those are great because you essentially get the best version of the NES soundtrack you could possibly get, but it's just, you don't have to worry about what hardware you're using. And the NES's, you don't lose the sound effects because the sound chips need to alternate between music and sound effects sometimes, depending on what this music is. So yeah, those are the ones I would start with. And any of the arcade replacements, so like Mortal Kombat with the arcade soundtrack, that's all pretty good. That's where I would start. Once you get a little bit further, there's a lot of ridiculous ones that I appreciate those too. I'm not throwing shade, but there's some that were definitely weird and wacky, and maybe that's your thing. But without a doubt, Super Metroid is the one I would go to, and I'll leave a link to the interview I did with Sam so you could better understand what it is that he did, because I just butchered the explanation. Sorry. Hades Hot Gun and Soaps works at a medical clinic that was getting rid of old equipment, and they have a CRT ultrasound machine monitor that they want to try hooking up to their PS2, but they have no experience with PVMs. It has 4 BNC connectors, they think, that read B, GV, R, and sync, and they have HD Retrovision component cables for their PS2. They also have a RetroTink 5X, but what else would they need to test out the monitor? They saw the RetroTink store has an HD15 dongle for PS2 and HD15 to BNC connectors. Should they get those, or is there a way to use their Retrovision component cables? So I would start with the cheapest option, and maybe you're going to throw your $5 in the garbage by accident, but I think this is a worthy gamble to take. Try getting some RCA to BNC connectors, the cheap ones. I'll leave a link to whichever ones I could find that are the cheapest for you. And just try plugging in the HD Retrovisions and just match B, G, and R up to the colors of the cable, and try to look to see if there's any buttons you could press to switch it to component video mode. If it is a professional monitor, you're probably going to see something like YPBPR internal sync, INT-sync. It might just say component video on it, but the Sony ones, you actually have to go into the menu using the buttons, not like the service menu or anything. Just hit menu, you go down to setup, and then you select the input, and then you set it between RGB and component, and then internal and external sync. So try that because it's cheap, and go from there. And if you have time, report back and let me know, or DM me or something. And then after that, we could figure out what else it could do. If it does only support RGBS, which maybe it does, I'm not really sure. But then if you already have a whole bunch of HD Retrovision cables, you could just get a comp to RGB from Mike Chi and just have it converted to the right format. You would need that plus a SCART to BNC cable, but then you're done. So congrats on picking up the CRT. That's absolutely worth your time to try and mess with it and get it working. But I think just start with the cheapest and kind of go from there. And also, if you have a model number, if you have any issues, post the model number next time, and I could try to look it up and see if there's anything I could find. Well, that's it for this week. If you have any questions at all, please just ask them wherever it is that you support, because it's kind of hard to figure out what's a new question on an old post. Plus, like you saw today, I like just scrolling through each one of the services, answering the questions off the cuff like we were hanging out at an expo together somewhere. So any questions at all, just fire away right there. And of course, and especially, thank you to anyone who supports in absolutely any way. Well, that's it, and I will see you next week.